Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I'm Allison. This is where I'm from 160 with Diane, who is here already with me. How are you today, Diane?
I'm doing great. How are you, Allison?
I'm good. As I said, because we're on Zoom, I can talk to you beforehand. I just went to the dentist and I don't have any cavities. And that is
It's
always
good
good.
news.
What's funny, and what my kids might tell you, or my husband, I've never had any cavities. And I still want to go to the dentist. I'm like, no cavities, even though I have no dental trauma, really.
Yeah,
It's still
you
like the
can
thing.
speak now. Yeah.
Mhm. So, and how are you? And you rushed from work. Thanks.
I did. I've been rushing all around. Yeah, but I'm doing good. It's been a nice long day of teaching, and I got a little bit of self-care time in there
Oh, good.
too. Yeah, so
Important. We have to take care of ourselves.
yeah.
I was just having that conversation with my dentist. So, anything else before you read your poem?
No, I'm really excited about this, and I'm so glad to be included.
Oh, I'm excited.
All right, should I just begin?
Sure.
All right, where I'm from. I am from iridescent princess wallpaper, from flea market champion sweatshirts and summertime jelly shoes. I am from that condominium complex across from the pretty neighborhood with all those above ground pools and yards. My streets are named alphabetically for trees. My sidewalks curve in labyrinthine patterns, perfect for biking hard through clumped woods and behind buildings and up hills and down behind dumpsters. I can smell them. Behind one, I had my first kiss. I am from pine trees, wood chips, and the one red rose plant my dad nurtured every summer. He'd have me pose with it for photos, like I was sniffing it. Look. And I'm from that tiny lima bean plant I grew from a milk carton. I missed Nicole and wanted so badly for her to play with me, so I told her, come help me pick lima beans. And man, there are so many lima beans. Whew. And she came over, picked the one precious lima bean pod just starting, and went home. I'm from herring and wine sauce on New Year's, straight out of the jar for luck. We longed for luck. And I'm from sparkling green hooded eyes, from Fred, and here, do I look like my mother? Joan. I'm from giving up your art for practical reasons and giving too much to people who don't care. From I'll get you when you least expect it, and if you're frightened, pray to Jesus. I'm from getting dropped off by my agnostic dad at the Lutheran church for Sunday school, where I watched Shaking, that movie about the second coming, under blinky fluorescent lights. After a quiet drive home, he yelled to my mother, they're telling her to love God more than us. I'm from Long Island in the 80s. Roller rinks, town fairs, and Knights of Columbus bingo halls. Ginger cookie sauerbraten, ketchup heavy fricadella, and Stella Doro Pfeffernuss. Pfeffernuss. From a beatnik father who could swan dive at the condo pool. Wow. From a shy mother who looked Hawaiian. Look, if she wore a white dress and hibiscus behind her ear. They were both so good and beautiful. Look at these pictures. I keep them here in the guest room, beloved guests. I got into scrapbooking for a while, but I couldn't cut these pictures. I can't. I want every detail in the background, every slant of light, flower, tree, floor strewn thing, slice of something sweet, to feel, to see, to taste, now that they're gone. I thought I was forgetting them, but my God, I could go, gaze, shiver, pray, eat on. Thank
Beautiful.
you.
um Really emotional. There was so much there that um I want to talk about the how you said giving too much to people who what was the exact
Yeah, who don't care.
yeah. that like
Yes.
hit me in the gut when I read it, and then when you read it out loud, like, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Yeah. I read this out loud to my daughter yesterday,
mm,
my daughter and my husband.
mm,
Um, and she said, "Why did you write that?" No one's gonna want to hear that. I'm
that's
like, I
interesting.
know, but it's like really true. It feels
Mm.
really true to me, and maybe someone else will have felt that, and this will be the first time they hear it in language or something. That's important too.
I definitely felt that. I think so many people were trained, women in particular, to do that, like as if that was their highest virtue,
Yeah.
was to care regardless if the care was returned.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that really, and and just all of your descriptions at the end about scrapbooking and not wanting to lose those details. I did some scrapbooking,
Yeah.
and I had similar feelings like this. I ended up just putting them in a hole,
Yeah.
which sort of defeats the purpose of scrapbooking,
Right.
except that they're preserved in a good way, which was
Yeah.
the main thing. But it's like all of that is so rich, like all of those details and the light and the way it changes over time, the way photos change over time, like
Yeah.
I don't know. So that was
Sometimes you come
something
back
I
and
hadn't really thought about, but was so perfectly put.
yeah, I mean, sometimes you come back to a photo and you see something that you hadn't noticed before in the background, and it's like exactly what you needed to see
Mhm.
at that moment.
I think
Remember,
especially go ahead. What were you saying?
I was just remembering, like my mother's sister. I never met her. My aunt Ruthie, she died from breast cancer before I was born, and I had
Mm,
this picture of her with her husband, and they were in their living room, and like every time I came back to that picture, like years after years, I always noticed something else on the floor or in the background. I'm like, oh, they kept fish, or, oh, they were eating those kinds of cookies, and it made me realize how precious that kind of background information can be.
mhm. Yeah, and you don't have that in really old photos. Really old photos are really just
Right.
people.
Posed.
So, yeah, I have like one of ancestors outside, and I love that because you see the tree and the house, and like there's something to ground them in their reality. Um,
Exactly.
and yeah, I have always been obsessed with pictures.
Mhm.
And it's been so interesting returning to them while I'm writing a memoir because they help me with the timeline, like, oh,
Yeah.
this was because I don't know if you have this experience, but sometimes it's all just a clump. It's really hard to remember
Mhm.
when those things all occurred. So I'm like, oh, it's good I've always been the keeper of photos. this is
Yeah.
this is now very good because I
I love
I
that.
I'm a person like if you have a picture of me, please send it because I
Yeah.
want to see it.
Yeah. I wonder how many of us writers are also like the photo keepers
Yeah.
families. I think probably a lot of us are. Yeah.
Well,
I was
because you
thinking,
also oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
that's okay. I was thinking about this one photo back from my scrapbooking days. Like I was really into the scrapbooking. Like I was,
Okay.
you remember like creative memories? It was one of those like
Yes.
those what do they call them? Like the
Well, wasn't it like a store and a whole thing? I
it
mean,
was
wasn't there a whole
store.
movement?
It was like Tupperware. It was a movement. It was like Tupperware where you had like a team and you were
Yes.
trying to sell scrapbooks to people.
Yes. I
So
was
I was,
never involved, but a friend of mine comes
yeah,
from a very large religious family, and it was part of the whole thing.
yeah, yeah. So for a short time, I was very into that. And it did feel sort of compulsive to me.
Hmm.
The way that
Yeah.
writing can sometimes feel compulsive in terms of
Hmm.
like recording memory. Um, and during that time, I was trying to put together the scrapbook of my time in Sweden. And I had this photo. Remember, I said I can't cut up these pictures. I had this photo of me standing out on this jetty um, in this bay. And there's like a sailboat off up to the right. In the distance, I could see these hills that I remember climbing in sandals, like not proper footwear, and socks because it was raining and cold, and all these little details, a little place, this little ice cream shop
Hmm.
on the dock in the background. And when I went to put it into the scrapbook, I meant to just cut it, like just myself, so I could be the main person in the photo. And then I wound up cutting like all the other little pieces and putting them in their own little sections, like this
Mhm,
part of the dock, this part of the hill, this part of the jetty. And when I look at it now, I feel like I see stories in each one of those little tiny
mhm.
pieces of picture.
Yeah.
I was not a good scrapbook consultant. I was not a
Me
good person.
neither. I did cut up some and I did cut some people out on
Yeah.
purpose. And but yeah, I kind of the one I'm glad for all the ones I kept whole.
Mhm.
Because it's interesting too to see the dynamics of because we didn't take like a million pictures.
Mhm.
Now, I mean, you can still feel dynamics, I think, in pictures, but especially back then when you took like three pictures of some
Yeah.
enormous event, you could really like who's standing by who's kind of grimacing, all of that is telling a
Right.
story. And the thing I was going to say before was that I think I wouldn't be surprised if the keeper of photos and writers that there is definitely overlap because I think too, particularly I would think memoirists because we oftentimes keep the pictures and learn the stories of the people in the pictures because otherwise the pictures are meaningless. It's just a bunch of
Mhm.
random old people or like just some people who we don't understand how we're all related. And so, I mean, I have the old picture and I know who these people are and what they meant to my mother and my grandmother.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if there's overlap for sure.
Yeah. I did a class a few months ago where we incorporated speculative
Mm-hmm.
memoir, speculative storytelling just based on photos and what we were seeing in the background, what stories could we invent that would enlarge our understanding of these
Mm-hmm.
people for whom we might just have like one little shred of story, a little anecdote. What more can we imagine about their lives? It was really special.
That does sound really fascinating. And I think, too, as a person who was often described as one line, because I came from a family of five kids, so you get sort of, uh, you hear she's this, he's this. Lots of times that one story we've heard about people is such a, I don't know if it's accurate or inaccurate, but it's definitely one side
Mm.
and the side that, you know, that was convenient to remember. So
Yeah,
it'd be interesting to try to expand that and think about why was that the thing? Why is that the one story?
exactly. And why was it convenient to remember? Was it like the most outrageous story? Was it them on their
Oftentimes.
worst day?
Mhm,
And that's what's being passed down, right? It's whatever we can do to like get to know these people, from our past, even if
mhm.
we're just imagine it, it just gives them dignity, I think.
Yeah, I think it's also very powerful to feel connected to those who came before us, for better, for worse, even if the memories aren't positive, just to sort of know more.
Yeah,
Like we didn't just arrive, it's been generations of people who've made us. So um I had another question and now it's gone. Oh, the alphabet. I lived in Boulder, Colorado when I was in high school, and the streets there are alphabetic by trees. So I loved that so much. And so when you said that, it's just, I don't know, it made me so happy. And I grew up on a little island where it was alphabetic by I don't even know what, just
yeah.
European things that seemed fancy to whoever made the place up. Um, but I love that. Did you like it? Did you have a connection to it? Obviously you did. You wrote about it.
Yeah, yeah, I don't it was so interesting, like, I loved this prompt so much because it delivered me to some place that I didn't expect, a place from my past, and I remembered, like, biking hard through those woods, like, all around my neighborhood, and I could tell my parents, "Oh, I'm going to Juniper,"
Yeah.
and they would know how many streets away that was because we lived over on beach,
Oh,
right?
that's so true. I
Yeah.
love that. It's so true. Did
Yeah,
you
yeah,
do
it
that
was
too?
just, a wonderful way to, like, mentally have a map of your
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. And also to know, I think, how you're getting bigger because you can go
Yeah,
further.
right. I could go
And
all the way to Kukui. I can't believe I remember that name, but yeah, the last street in the neighborhood was Kukui.
oh, is
For
that
the
so
K.
Oh,
Yeah, with a
okay.
K.
Okay. We had A through, and where I grew up, we definitely had A through Z. Z was Zurich.
Oh, wow.
Um, those were some pretty fancy houses. And they gave away full size candy bars at Halloween.
Oh,
So
you always remember those houses. Yeah.
yeah, it was like, okay, we're gonna walk down to Zurich because it was the ways. We did. We did
Yeah.
it. Oh man, yeah. Those street names are still so evocative to me and bring back so many memories. So
Mm,
thank you for I love these poems because basically every single one brings something back to me that I haven't thought of maybe at all or not in that way. So
mhm.
it's amazing uh, to me how
Yeah,
interconnected we all are.
we really are.
Mhm. So, your experience of writing it, do you have any more to say about
No,
that?
I think it really was encapsulated in those last couple of lines. And I know I told you I was really struggling with the ending, but I knew I had to end on that idea of being surprised. I thought I was forgetting them, but my God, I could gaze and shiver and pray and eat on, right? This idea that, um, with this constraint of
Right.
sort of mad libby
I
exercise.
think so. Yeah, the best Mad Lib ever.
Yeah, with the constraint, what happens is that you wanna grow to the edges of the constraint, and in this case, I felt
Mhm.
myself wanting to burst the edges of the constraint and just keep writing and going longer. I with your permission, of course, I taught this in
Yes.
my grief writing Sundays class last week, and people were saying, "I just wanna write more and more, all these memories are flooding back to me," and I said, "Go."
Amazing.
You have arrived. Like you arrived at the place
Exactly.
that you were meant to write today and just
Yeah.
keep going. And we got
Mhm.
really long, epic
Mhm.
poems about things people, hadn't thought about in a really long time. It was beautiful to hear.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is, and I think, yeah, the end got me you talking about it and when you read it, like, this idea of that we think we're forgetting, um,
Yeah.
people, and I think I talk with a lot of grieving people, and there are these ideas like, oh, I can't remember their voice, or I can't remember their smell, or I can't, these oftentimes sensory memories go with time, and the grief associated with losing those memories. And I think when we are able to realize that we're not forgetting, that we're remembering, it's like just the most it's
Mm.
an incredible feeling. Like all we need to do is really be with it and we will remember. Or have something like this that helps us open the door if we are just like unable to find a way in, and
Exactly.
that's what I like about this prompt. Go ahead. What you're saying.
I think just as people, who are writers are often the photo keepers, I think we're also the story
Mhm.
keepers for our families.
Yeah.
And so, like in my situation, I was telling you before we started today,
Mhm.
like both my parents passed away, and I don't really have a lot of other family, no siblings, that kind of thing. And so I
Yeah.
felt all these stories about my grandparents, my great grandparents, little shreds of story, they were all mine to hold and to
Mm.
keep repeating. And sometimes when I fear that I'm forgetting them, it's this um, a true worry. It's like a fear that all of that is going to be lost. And I heard this wonderful quote that goes, all is forgotten, but nothing is lost. And I keep coming back to that all the
Yeah.
time. That, yeah, we will forget, but then something like this, it's like a key and it opens it up, and there's the vault. Like, there's all the
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah.
It's still inside of us, it still made us who we were.
Yeah. And it's in us in the way that we are and the things that we love and hate, and all of those things are there, and that is true. And like you talking about alphabetized streets and me just thinking of 40 stories about streets.
Yeah.
That makes me happy. I always feel a sense of wonder when I am reconnected with memories. I Before we started, I said I'm very sorry for your loss, and I am incredibly sorry for your loss, losing both of your parents. and not, like you say, holding all of those like not having a person to share that with. The
Yeah, a witness, right? I mean,
Yes,
what I'm
yes.
grateful for is that my husband has a really good memory and he never met them, but he's heard me tell stories. And so sometimes he'll mention it back to me, like, oh, remember that story you told me about your dad? And I'm like, tell me more. I forgot about that. But he has a really good memory for all the details that are, somewhere up in my noodle.
Yeah, it's nice. I think that is one of the unsung beauties of a long partnership is sharing those stories, and especially of people who are no longer with us. Like I know my husband, his father died, and my brother died, and so we had that in common very early on, um, and also just having a partner who is comfortable with grief is a huge
Mm.
relief to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone who's really listening.
Hmm. Yeah, it isn't like waiting for you to move on
Right. What a
to
gift.
something more palatable.
Yeah.
Um, well, anything else? I was really moved by your poem, Diane, and champion sweatshirts really speak to me. That's not deep,
Yeah.
but I was like, oh, champion sweatshirts. I actually about a year ago wanted to order one. Like
uh,
I was having the desire to
yeah.
feel like I did. Because of course it was enormous. Mine were always huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Always enormous. And they didn't
yes.
really move. Like you moved
No,
within them, right?
no, they felt so safe.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I did get a sweatshirt that has some similarities to it, but it's just not as big. Like nothing is as enormous as it was back then. I was very much a fan of large
Yeah.
clothes.
I think I led with that because someone on Facebook from my youth,
Mhm,
like elementary school, like Facebook page or something,
mhm.
posted a photo of the abandoned flea market in our town. It used to be the roller rink, then it became the flea market. And it was just so sad to see it, all those memories of like going there and buying the cozy sweatshirts, buying the best friend shirts and the little keychains and stuff, all the stuff that, when you're a teen, it just felt too cool. It's all gone.
Yes, enormous sweatshirts with Umbro shorts was our look in
Yes.
Colorado. So
I don't know if you had Z Cavaricis.
we did. We did.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That
Yes.
was very Long Island.
Um, yeah, it's funny how, and the Umbros were just plastic. I mean, why did we wear those? They were terrible. But you just did because you did. There was no like, but I only had one pair. I didn't like fully go hard, but I had them. I needed to fit in that moment. So I love all of those details because every poem has something like that that has not doesn't really exist in the same way now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing that you're doing. Thank you for letting me be a part of this. I can't wait to watch more and more.
Thank you. I mean, it's it's my privilege and joy. I'm, at first it was like I had to, I mean, I just asked everyone if they were interested and if they would, and personally, like, please. And it's been nice. Now people sometimes come to me and it feels like, I mean, in my dreams it would be sort of this archive of people's stories, and as I add to it and I see 200 not so far off,
Yeah.
uh it's like, wow, because I've always been fascinated by people's stories, um and I think particularly of their childhoods, because I found mine so formative, and I spent a good chunk of my adult life feeling like I should get over it. And so uh, you know, in my memoirs about that. But I realize no one's getting over it. Like a lot of people carry that weight of feeling
Mhm.
like, oh, I should be like a grown up now and not think about my childhood. But how would we not think about this thing that shaped us
Yeah,
and
it
why?
is. Yeah. And it connects us. I'm talking to you about street names and we're bonded now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I appreciate you joining me, Diane, and a shout out to Pause, the Project
Yes.
for Advancing Health Stewardship. That is where I started following you then. I was so moved by your talk and everything you had to say. So it's to me, it's special when someone I'm aware of then becomes aware of me, and it's like, oh,
Yes.
let's talk.
And a shout out to Janine,
Yeah.
who champions that work and, effectively brought us together for this.
Yes, and introduce me to this prompt.
Yes,
So
I was reading about that.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I mean,
Thank
I'll
you.
forever be grateful. Well, obviously to Georgella for writing the poem to begin with, but
Yes.
um, and being such a generous. She's such a great example of like how generosity of spirit just
Mm,
grows creativity. Like when we're scarce with it, I think it slows it or kills it. But this like generosity she has with her poem and she never could have imagined it would be what it is today. But because of her ability to just be sure, you know, Fred, the guy who made the prompts, make a
yeah.
prompt, do what it's just, I don't know. I find her and the whole thing very inspiring.
Yes. And I mean, even the idea that, one of the lines is, I am from this person and that person. And most of our poems are just giving names. What so many of us would be like, oh, no one would want to know who that is. No one knows why am I writing this down. But the invitation to just speak a loved one's
I
name
know.
out loud, it's so powerful. So it really is a wonderful example of, you be free and you invite other people to be free.
Yes. And obviously, it's an amazing example about specificity. And it has changed my life and my writing because it's like, oh, this needs to be more specific. Like, the more specific it is, the more universal it is. And you hear that and you know intellectually, but it's a very different experience having it every week showed to me.
Right. Right.
Like, oh, okay. I love this. So, thank you so much, Diane. And this was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Take good care.
You too. And now I have to learn how to turn off the